A number of the central aspects of the anthropological notion of culture uh, have come in for increasing criticism in recent years. It seems less and less plausible to presume that cultures are self-contained and clearly bounded units, internally consistent and unified wholes of beliefs and values simply transmitted to every member of their respective groups as principles of social order. What we might call a postmodern stress on interactive process and negotiation, indeterminacy, fragmentation, conflict, and porosity replaces these aspects of the modern post-1920s understanding of culture. Or, more properly, as we will see, forms a new basis for their reinterpretation. Fueling this postmodern refiguring of the notion of culture are arguments impugning both the accuracy and ethics of the prior notion. Anthropologists espousing a modern understanding of culture have been misled by the analogies they draw to texts, organisms, works of art. They have mistakenly read the presuppositions of their methods of approach into what they study. They've ignored or grossly underestimated evidence conflicting with presuppositions of stasis and consensus. Their understanding of culture has been vitiated by associations with nationalism, colonialism, and the power plays of intellectual elites. In part, these criticisms and the resulting postmodern shift in reflexivity, especially in the notion of culture, represent an internal movement within anthropology. Tensions riddle the account. Tensions, for example, between the material and ideational dimensions of social life, between historical process and stasis, between the agency of persons and social interactions and social determinism, and between the hope for a new human possibility and the importance of social stability. Tensions due in great deal to the lingering traces of the torturous history of the notion of culture. Anthropologists such as James Clifford would purify the notion of culture of this history, ridding it, for example, of the remains of high culture aestheticism, or they would bring such tensions to the surface in order to resolve them in favor of previously slighted features of the notion, for instance, in favor of historical process, submerged in the modern account of culture within a static, synchronic analysis. They would have anthropology be true to its ethical intentions, true for, one, to its tolerant, non-evaluative impulse jeopardized by associations of the discipline with colonialism and the influence of nationalism on its understanding of culture. Those anthropologists who viewed culture with primary descriptive intent as part and parcel of public action may be prone to attend to the messy details of culture in action. Challenges to the modern understanding of culture and the resulting postmodern shift are also products, however, of a cross-fertilization with other disciplines. Disciplines such as history, literary theory, conflict sociology, and political science begin to employ an anthropological notion of culture, and in doing so, bring their own perspectives to it. Once historians recognize that events are culturally mediated for both historians and the people they study, once historians engage in long-term studies, make it part of their task to reconstruct the mentalities of the past. The anthropological notion of culture they employ is historicized. If history is a matter of culture, then culture is a matter of history. Scholars of the global economy, Marxist world systems theorists, have an interest in the way, say, international corporate capitalism is played out culturally in local contexts. They thereby alter the merely local, closed system analysis of culture commonly employed by anthropologists. In great part because of the social constructionism that the anthropological idea of culture highlights, literary theorists begin to put popular and high culture on a continuum, thereby modifying the traditional associations of high culture that anthropologists tend to employ unthinkingly as analogies. Deconstruction and post-structuralist discourse theory suggests that determinacy, closure, and consistency are no more to be expected in the tacit cultural forms of everyday life than they are in formalized and explicit ones. Conflict sociologies, which follow Max Weber or Karl Marx rather than Emil Durkheim or Talcott Parsons, in conceiving of society in terms of conflict among differing groups or forces, increasingly give the meanings of behavior and situation for human actors a central place in their study, and thereby contest assumptions of consensus in cultural analysis. Neo-Marxists, influenced by Antonio Gramsci and Michel Foucault, modify their understanding of ideology to bring it into line with an anthropological notion of culture. Discussion of ideology shifts from legal, religious, and political discourse to the common sense of everyday life, to the experiential meaning of common human affairs. The struggles for power, in which ideology figures become in this way dimensions of all human activity and are highlighted in importance. According to these theorists, power cannot be consolidated effectively through coercion alone, but requires consent. Political struggle is therefore not focused on control of the state and its military or policing apparatuses. Political struggle is waged over the meaning of situations and culturally valorized terms. For instance, family, freedom, patriotism. Politics become a matter of culture, and culture, as a result, is politicized, especially given these associations, which ideology and ideology critique can be launched against the anthropologist's understanding of culture. The way an anthropologist describes culture is ideological in the sense that it disguises the unequal workings of power both within the society studied and between the anthropologist and his or her subjects. Inattention to historical processes. Underlying a number of criticisms of the modern notion of culture is an attack on its dehistoricized character. In the modern approach, culture appears at the start as a given, as something already formed and finished. Assuming a culture is already there on the ground, the anthropologist's task is simply to describe its shape and workings and/or its transformative effects on individuals, its mode and efficacy of transmission. Left out of the account is how culture came to have this character, how it came to have the shape that is now transmitted with whatever degree of success. The modern anthropologist does affirm that human beings produce culture in and through their social interactions. Every culture is a human construction. But he or she fails to give sufficient attention to this activity of production itself. Culture, therefore, appears as a product apart from the historical processes in and through which it emerges. The agency of human actors, their ability to determine their own lives, is also disparaged, and contrary to